We sit up here every day and talk about Grizzlies players, Ja Morant, Desmond Bain, Jaren Jackson Jr. But even on the second level, we talk about the rookies, Zach Edey, and then we talk about the other guys like Brandon Clark, Luke Kennard. What about Derrick Rose? What about the one guy on this roster who's been an MVP before? How will he factor into this team? I think he'll have a big role. Let's talk about it right here, coming up on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am your host today, Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with us on today. Remember that today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase via Gametime. Well, it ain't exactly game time in Memphis yet, but the days are starting to tick down. Today, we are about 3 weeks from the start of Grizzlies camp, a little bit more than 3 weeks. So things are starting to pick up a little bit. I know I'm excited, talking to a lot of people about it. People seem to be getting excited around here, but there are a lot of questions, about this team, starting with the injury bug, right? We see Gigi Jackson. We talked about it, over the last couple of episodes. Joe Monak's on yesterday, me the episode before that. And, even beyond, the Gigi Jackson injuries, it's other things, Ja coming back, Desmond Bain, returning. Can they stay healthy? Jaren Jackson Jr., playing the four again alongside of a Zach Edey. What will that look like? So many questions. But I've been on the record several times. I've said my big question for this year's team is what happens if Ja misses a game or two or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6? Who starts at point guard? How many minutes does that guy play? But more than anything, are the Grizzlies going to be able to win? And at this point, I don't know. Rather, to put it frankly, I don't think so. Not right now. It's Tyus Jones isn't on this roster. But I like where the Grizzlies stand from a backup point guard position. I just don't like the idea of either of the options becoming the starting point guard in the, if Ja misses some time. But let's get into that because Derrick Rose, we haven't talked about him a lot. Like I said, we talked about all these different guys. Derrick Rose, and he's quiet. You don't see him doing too much in the offseason, traveling with the family, doing some little family man stuff here and there. He's not really posting workouts all over social media, things like that. What about Derrick Rose? And I know some of you are saying, Damichael, he's old. He can't stay healthy and all of that. But here's my thing. Derrick Rose, at this point of his career, should not be playing starters minutes. I think most of you can agree to that. If not all of you, everybody, we should all be able to agree to that. He's very, the injuries have added up over the past couple years. 24 games played with the Grizzlies last season, 27 games the year with that, before that with the Knicks, 26 games the year before that with the Knicks. Then I think 50 total games played in 2020, in the 2020 and 2021 season. So it shouldn't be a surprise that, Derrick Rose it should not be expected to play heavy minutes. But with all that being said, here's where I stand. I feel like with Derrick Rose, he is right. He should get the first crack at the backup point guard position. And most of you people know Scottie Pippen Jr. very high on, love his defensive effort, the intensity, the athleticism, his smarts really stand out. But one of the things that went unnoticed, partly because of the injuries and everything, Derrick Rose was actually having a good year on the floor when he was healthy. Derrick Rose played well for the Grizzlies last season. If he played only 24 games, like I'm got to start there because that's where everybody's going to go to. He only played 24 games. 7 of those games were starts. Derrick Rose shouldn't be starting 7 out of 24 games. But anyways, that's not my point. The point is he averaged 8 points, which was higher than the year before. He also averaged 3.3 assists, which was up from 1.7 assists in the previous season. Then, on top of that, you're talking about a guy who shot 36.6% from three-point range. 36.6% from three-point range. Grizzlies get that shooting from Derrick Rose. That's positive because the year before he was down to 30%, and that was after having a couple really good three-point shooting seasons. Derrick Rose shot 46% from the field. You know why he shot 46% from the field? He shot 49.2% on two-point field goals. That was his highest since that 2020-2021 season. That was his highest pretty much in 3 to 4 years. There's clearly still some left in the tank. And if you don't believe me, go talk to the Grizzlies players. I was talking to those guys, and they were telling me, man, Derrick Rose still has that quickness, that shiftiness, that explosiveness. You don't see it as much, but those gears are there. This is not a guy that you can say, oh, he's 36 years old. Oh, let me sag up off of him and give him some room. He's going to blaze past you still. The quickness is there in spurts. You know, it's not as consistent as it was, you know, on a play-by-play basis, but it's there. You know, I remember Zaire Williams telling me a story last summer about how Derrick Rose crossed him up a little bit and just was making these wild plays throughout camp. So I say all that to say, at this point, it feels like Derrick Rose has become a forgotten piece. And in a perfect world, I'm going to add this. In a perfect world, Derrick Rose is your third point guard. Like you have a backup point guard like the caliber of a Tyus Jones where he could, Ja goes down, a guy who could step in and the show goes on. But in Derrick Rose, you got a guy who can score, who can get to the basket, who can facilitate, and who absolutely hates turnovers. I've seen his face after he makes certain turnovers and things like that. And it's also year 2 for him playing with these guys. I mean, Derrick Rose said it probably more than anybody last year from the standpoint of, look, we got to work this thing out. I don't know these guys' games very well yet. It's going to take some time. And the time just never materialized. Derrick Rose, I think he didn't have a stretch last season where he played more than 5 or 6 games together. 5 or 6 game stretches, that was it. But you would like to think with a healthy Ja Morant back in the fold, or a healthy Ja in the fold, now you kind of decrease the usage. Derrick Rose is not going to be playing 16 and a half, 17 minutes with Ja Morant in the fold. So if he's the backup point guard, you're talking possibly 12 minutes. That's probably 3-minute spurts and things like that. Derrick Rose can do that. And I don't know how healthy he'll stay through that stretch, but if he can't stay healthy through that stretch, then that tells us everything we need to know. But I think it is worth the risk, especially considering that you also have Scottie Pippen Jr., a guy who I think is also could be a terrific backup for the Grizzlies. I don't know what either of those guys could do if they had to start in a pinch, but they are both suited to play alongside of Luke Kennard, Vince Williams, Brandon Clark, and mix in with the stars, maybe some lineups with a Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., etc. But they both are suited to do that. I mean, the examples are there. Like some people may still be saying, I'm still not sold on Derrick Rose, Michael. All I'll say is go back and look at that Denver Nuggets game from last season. That was the one that stood out to me. The Grizzlies, it was early in the season. It's one of the first home games. Derrick Rose pretty much in the fourth quarter, early fourth quarter, was in his normal rotation run, was pretty much supposed to come out the game after that. Taylor Jenkins couldn't pull him. He was playing too well. Ended up playing 22 minutes in that game. Derrick Rose shot 6 of 14 from the field, made 2 of his 3-pointers, 16 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 22 minutes. If he's able to once a week give you those type of bursts, not necessarily, 16 points in 22 minutes, but the ability to get to that floater, the ability to create for teammates. Because at the end of the day, he's a point guard, and he's going to have better teammates on the floor this season than last season. All of that should lead to better performances, not just for Derrick Rose, but for the Grizzlies. I think when it comes to the backup point guard position, the Grizzlies are fine. Derrick Rose, Scottie Pippen Jr. When it comes to, that type, because that was the thing. Right? And let me be able to differentiate, because that might be confusing some people. Joe Monac, shout out to my guy, my co-host. He touched on it a lot. Tyus Jones, when he filled in for Ja Morant, was great as a fill-in point guard. But if you looked at his numbers as the backup point guard, they were not as good. Like when he was just coming off the bench, especially in his last season, more so than the year before. His backup point guard numbers were not as good. Whereas I think it's flip-flopped with Derrick Rose. When he's going to come in, he has to play in short spurts, 3-minute, 4-minute increments, and then goes to the bench, get some rest, not too much, pressure on the legs, knees, whatever the case may be. I think he'll be fine. So I think the Grizzlies are just fine with Derrick Rose, and having Scottie Pippen Jr. on that two-way contract right now. It's just, it's a plus. I still have not given up on the idea that Derrick Rose will be an impactful player for this team. I'm not saying he's going to be some world beater where he's the difference maker or anything like that, but he's going to have an impact simply because there's still some left in the tank, whether you believe it or not. It's all going to come down to health for him, and if he's healthy, if he's playing, as we saw last season, he was a productive player, 46% shooting from the field. You can't get too much better than that from Derrick Rose, especially at this point of his career. Speaking of this point of his career, Jake LaRavia is at a crucial time in his NBA career. And we're going to talk about Jake LaRavia here coming up on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, you got to remember that today's show is brought to you by eBay Motors. Patient, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you can just get your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash, with all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Coming up here next on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk Jake LaRavia. What's in store for him this season? Stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I'm Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with us today. On the first segment, we talked about Derrick Rose. I thought, while he was on the floor, he was impactful. And as long as that's the case, look, you can't predict health. And the health bug does tell you that Derrick Rose is probably going to deal with some injuries this upcoming season. I think it is a plus that you have Scottie Pippen Jr. waiting in the wings, potentially behind him, but it's also a plus to have a guy with Derrick Rose's veteran savviness and his ability to still be a productive player in short increments is still a plus based on what I saw last year. So as long as you got some help behind him, which they do, they have Scottie Pippen Jr., they should be just fine at the backup point guard spot. See how I went this entire episode and I didn't say anything about, his veteran, his ability to, show lead by example and show the players. No, we're just talking about the hooper Derrick Rose. We ain't talking about all that leadership qualities and all of that. We talked 100 times about that. We're just talking about getting on the floor, crossing guys over, getting to the basket, using that floater, kicking it out to Desmond Bain, Luke Kennard, making some shots. But anyways, I digress. That's my one I digress for the episode. Shout out to Joe Monac. But let's talk Jake LaRavia, because we mentioned him a little bit over the last couple of episodes, and I can't stress enough how this is a crucial season for him. One, because the guy who was drafted in the first round with him, David Roddy, 2022 NBA draft for the Memphis Grizzlies, he's gone. He got shipped out. That, to me, should have been a wake-up moment. That was a moment to say, man, I gotta show these dudes something. There are some decisions that have to be made before the season. That's why we're not even just talking regular season. Jake LaRavia's got to bring it in the preseason too, because he has an option on his deal that has to be picked up. And, they have to decide before the season. It's fifth-year player option. What is going to determine whether, we go into next season and he still has another year left on his contract, or another couple years left on his contract, or if we're going into next year and Jake LaRavia's a free agent. All of it still remains on the window. And, I've talked a lot about how guys play when it comes to those contract seasons or whatever. But Jake LaRavia, it's not even about that with him. It's about getting on the floor and proving what you already believe in yourself. Jake LaRavia already believes he's a good player. Jake LaRavia already believes he can be a productive player on this team. What I've noticed, and what I've said a bunch of times, you watch Jake LaRavia play, you cannot pigeonhole box this guy. You cannot just say, go in the corner, here's some catch and shoot opportunities for you. And then if he misses 4 of them and takes 5 of them, oh, he's a bust. He's That's not Jake LaRavia's game. If you watch Jake LaRavia in Summer League, what did you see? You saw him getting busy, posting guys up, getting to the midi, off the dribble 3-pointers, pick and roll. And it's like, oh, he looks a lot more comfortable doing that. If you seen him down in the G League with the Memphis Hustle, that's what you saw some of. And I say all that to say, surely if you just flash your eye, you blink twice, you look at the roster really quick, there's no room for Jake LaRavia to kind of be that off-the-ball shot creator where his game pretty much, that's the best part of his game in my opinion, offensively at least. But if you stare at the roster a little bit longer, and you say, G.G. Jackson's hurt. Then you go to the bench unit and you take out the backup point guard factor and you say, Luke Kennard, he ain't really doing much off the dribble. Brandon Clark, I mean, you Grizzlies fans, you're very familiar with Brandon Clark's game. He's going to get to his spots. He's going to catch alley hoops. He's going to shoot that floater. And thank you for coming. Thank you for coming to the game. That's how Brandon Clark's going to get his baskets. Then Santi Aldama. A little pump fake here, a little pump fake there. A little flashy pass here, flashy pass there. Spot up 3-pointers. None of those guys that I just named, none of those 3 guys, even Vince Williams, same thing. Great defense. He's going to crash the glass. Spot up 3-point shots. None of those guys are going to be too quick to say, hey, give me a screen. Let me take this guy one-on-one real quick. He's too little. Jake LaRavia has that in his bag. Jake LaRavia's 6'7", 235 type guy. You put a smaller guy on him because teams are going to be willing to do that. Like, let's say he's in a mid-third quarter lineup with Ja Morant and Desmond Bane. The best 2 perimeter defenders are going to be on Ja Morant and Desmond Bane. And sometimes those smaller point guards, like if you're playing against the Minnesota Timberwolves, for example, that's the first team that pops in my head. Anthony Edwards is going to get one of Ja and Desmond Bane, and Jaden McDaniels is going to get the other. Mike Conley is going to slide down to guard, the 3. And if it's the starting lineup, it's Marcus Smart probably. But in this case, we're saying, it's the middle of the third quarter. Jake LaRavia is getting some run with the starters while Marcus Smart sits on the bench, Vince Williams on the bench, whatever the case may be. Mike Conley is going to be guard Jake LaRavia, and he has the ability to expose those type of matchups. That's why I say this is the golden opportunity for Jake LaRavia. Jake LaRavia's time is now to prove I belong on this roster. I can be instant offense off the bench. The rebounding's there. I'm sold on the fact that this is one of the guys who can help Jaren Jackson Jr. Like if Jaren's playing the 5, you throw him at the 4, you throw Jake LaRavia at the floor. He can be a productive rebounder in that way. I'm sold on that. And there are a couple other things I'm sold on too, but we'll talk about those in a second. Before we get to those, I just want to thank you guys for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, because it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Well, guess what? Get back to Jake LaRavia. I talked about the rebounding factor. He has good hands defensively too. If you watch him in summer league, and granted, it's summer league, you get 10 fouls, you get to be a little bit more aggressive. But the way he played defense from a hands perspective, because I think he's going to be a strong guy. You talk about 6'7", 230. He's going to be able to hold his own defensively from a strength standpoint. But to have those type of hands defensively, where I'm not saying he's Kyle Anderson or DeAnthony Melton or Jaren Jackson Jr., with his hands, or Marcus Smart for that matter. But the Grizzlies need those type of guys who can force those turnovers and get these guys in transition, because they didn't make all these coaching staff changes for no reason. That half-court offense needs a lot of work. And odds are likely that the results aren't going to happen overnight. Probably going to need some work early in the season too. And early in the season is when Jake LaRavia will probably get the most of his opportunity. It's the rebounding where you're in the game, when the Grizzlies move Jaren to the 5, mid-second quarter or early in the fourth quarter, something like that, and you're in the game. Go be that forceful rebounder that can help him out. Go be that guy who can help the Grizzlies get in transition, because he creates steals. And then the scoring will just come, right? Like, he doesn't have to, make, 6-7 shots a game and score 15 points or whatever the case may be. Because if you do those little things, all the other stuff's going to take care of itself. Again, he believes he's a really good three-point shooter. We haven't seen him shoot just like above league average from three-point range yet. I don't know if that's in the cards. I'm not banking on it. But what I can bank on is the rebounding and the defense to be plus for him. It's the golden opportunity for Jake LaRavia. It's now or never in my mind. If he can't do it now, look, it's hard for me to envision Jake LaRavia being, a future part of this team, because his time pretty much is right now. Speaking of right now, the Grizzlies made some coaching staff changes. Not really coaching staff changes, but some changes in the organization that we will talk about here next on Locked On Grizzlies. But before we get to that, remember that today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, BetterHelp is super convenient for anyone out there who wants to use BetterHelp. And here's the thing about BetterHelp. Think about your kids, for example, because this is mostly for therapy. Kids are always learning and growing, right? But as adults, sometimes we tend to lose that curiosity. And think about what is something that you'd like to learn. Like, you may have some things that you want to learn, whether it's gardening, a new language, or maybe how to finally beat your best friend in bowling. Well, therapy can help you kind of refine yourself in those sort of ways. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. And all you got to do is fill out a brief questionnaire, and you'll get matched up based on those answers with a licensed therapist. And remember, you can also switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. All you got to do is visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.com, BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to take advantage of those opportunities. Coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to talk about some staff changes on the Grizzlies that you probably didn't see, or you may have. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies, everyone. I'm Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal here in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you guys for tuning in with us on Locked On Grizzlies today. We've uncovered a lot. We talked about Derrick Rose in the first segment. Talked about Jake LaRavia in the second segment. You probably didn't turn today's show on. Expect to hear a lot about those two guys, but that's why you tune in to Locked On Grizzlies, because you never know who you're going to tune in and hear us talk about, or you never know who's going to be on here. More on that later. But with all that being said, the Grizzlies made a couple staff changes recently, and nothing that probably the casual eye would have just really noticed like that. The first change that I'm going to talk about is one that was reported by Adrian Wojnarowski, and that's the Philadelphia 76ers are hiring Memphis Grizzlies executive Ariana, and I might butcher her last name, but Ariana Adonian as the VP of player personnel. Let me talk about her for a second. And me and Joe Monex mentioned her a few episodes back. If you remember, she was included in the Athletics 40 under 40. We briefly mentioned her. And, as her ability as a scout, coming over from the Houston Rockets, joining the Memphis Grizzlies organization. And look, she's 20. She's 29 years old. I'm not saying this is a huge loss for the Grizzlies because she's a little down the pecking order with the Grizzlies. But with all that being said, this is someone that I know people in Memphis were very high on. Like there are people in Memphis who said things like she could be the first woman to reach the top, to be a GM in the NBA. She could be the first woman to become a GM in the NBA. And this step kind of proves it because she's only 29 years old. 29 years old and is now the VP of player personnel for the Philadelphia 76ers. She's basically one step below. She's one step below that job, that general manager job. So again, she's going to the Philadelphia 76ers. There is some familiarity there. Before she was in Memphis, she was in Houston with Daryl Morey. Then the Grizzlies came calling. She ends up coming to Memphis. And now she's going back to Philadelphia 76ers with Daryl Morey. They were high on her in Houston. The Grizzlies loved her scouting ability here. And she was a very crucial part to, the Grizzlies' ability to find some of these guys, their talent evaluating. Ariana was a big part of that. Again, they're high on her. And again, it's a good job for her to move up because, if you look at the Grizzlies, Tayshaun Prince, Zach Kleiman, Rich Cho, those people who are in those seats are pretty much expected to be around here for a while at this point. So great opportunity for her in Philly. We'll see what she does with it. But remember that, she's only 29. So there, a few years from now, when you're talking about who's going to be the first woman to break that barrier and become first GM in the NBA, this is a good person to put your bets on in that category. But then Grizzlies also made, a hire in recent days from that standpoint. If you noticed on social media, South Kent Hoops page on X congratulated Coach Chills, is what everyone calls Raphael Chillis, and for getting a job with the Grizzlies. And here's what the South Kent Hoops page said. It said, please join us in congratulating Raphael Chillis, South Kent's esteemed and former director of athletics, director of basketball, and head coach of prep basketball, who has taken on a new and exciting role with the Memphis Grizzlies. Throughout his tenure, Coach Chills has been a driving force behind the growth and success of our athletic program, and especially our basketball program, from overseeing championships to fostering a culture of excellence, sportsmanship, and brotherhood. Raphael's dedication, passion, and expertise have left an incredible mark on South Kent. So I asked a couple people in the basketball industry about Raphael Chillis because there are some people who know him, whether it's from like the Nike basketball grassroots scenes or just through, just the coaching fraternity. Like coaching in basketball is not it's a small world. A lot of these guys know each other. And all I heard was good things. To my understanding, though, is his role with the Grizzlies is not a bench role. It's more of that he's expected to be a scout, closer to Ariana's role in a way, but he's being brought in to be a scout for the Grizzlies. So probably not someone that you'll see, basically, just like you didn't see Ariana. But with all that being said, someone who has rave reviews. One of the people I talked about, just his charisma, his ability to really identify things, and to really, hammer home some of those things with the Grizzlies. So we'll see, the course of time. And this is not someone you're probably going to hear about a lot. It's a scout, potentially. But with all that being said, the Grizzlies are still making some changes around the margins. Now, the coaching staff is what it is pretty much at this point. No Memphis Tigers stuff going on over here, at least not to my knowledge. The Grizzlies already made their moves. So the staff pretty much set in stone. And now we're just gearing up for the regular season and preseason. Here comes October 1st. But before we get to that, remember, you'll be with us on next week on Locked On Grizzlies. And we have some good things coming for you next week as well. But thank you again for making Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On NBA podcast, where the season never ends, provide national expertise with a local perspective. You can find a link to the Locked On NBA in the description, so you don't need to search, because it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. On our next episode of Locked On Grizzlies, make sure you stay tuned for that. Because me and Joe Mullinax should be back together. We're still 3 days a week at this point. We might be 4 days a week next week. Just stay tuned. And I'm also going to have a special guest for you. It might be a current Grizzlies player, it might be a former Grizzlies player. You just never know. But make sure you stay tuned for that, because we will have someone coming to join us on Locked On Grizzlies. But until next time, Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.